This is rather like vitamin B6 or thiamine. It's inert. It has no function in the body until it's activated. So you could call the activated forms like the coenzyme forms of vitamin D. But vitamin D may be deficient, and it may not. But it could well be that it's the activated forms. So let's just run this through. So cholecalciferol is what we get from our diet, or supposed to get from our diet, which is from mushrooms, which are exposed to the sun. Okay, so wild mushrooms will have this. And the biggest source otherwise is dairy. Okay, so butter, we talked about previously, cheese, and dairy. Apart from that, 90% of the cholecalciferol that we get is from the sun by ultraviolet light at about 290 or so nanometers. This is into the ultraviolet A end of the spectrum, the one that penetrates through 5 layers of skin and basically converts dehydrocholesterol into cholecalciferol, or basic vitamin D. We then pop that into the blood and goes to the liver, where it's stored and is hydroxylated in the 25 position, because this is a steroid ring, and so it's called 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. So we've got one hydroxyl group on this. And this I call the stored form. We store it in the liver, we store it in the muscle, and we store it in the fat for the winter. It's thought we have about 3 months, and obviously individually we have different amounts that we can store. So if you get the last dose of sunshine at 290 nanometers on the 21st of September, okay, that's the equinox, because after that it doesn't go high enough beyond the 45 degrees to get the 290 nanometers. It'll be a higher wavelength, which won't make vitamin D. As you know, I've always said the same thing. If your shadow is longer than yourself, you won't make vitamin D. If your shadow is shorter than yourself, it means the sun is higher than 45 degrees, you will make vitamin D. So wherever you are in the world, at any time, you can have a look. And the fun in some places, when you get down into the Caribbean and things, you can't find your shadow. And then you know you're making vitamin D if there's no shadow there at all, because the sun's right dead ahead of you, right? But sometimes I go to a place in the winter and think, oh good, I'll probably make vitamin D. Last year, we went to Marrakesh in December, and apparently if you go that far south in December, you can make vitamin D. And I was so disappointed because at midday in winter there, the shadow was still longer. So it was nice and warm, it was 70 degrees. People were actually swimming in the swimming pool then. But the wretched shadow was longer than myself, and so there was no way I was making vitamin D. You've got to go further south than Marrakesh. So really for us, it's the Canaries would be the nearest, or Caribbean, or Kenya, or somewhere. Okay, so the storage therefore is about 3 months. That means we got to Christmas. If you were a good boy and girl and went out on the 21st of September for a few minutes at midday, which of course on the 21st of September midday is 1 o'clock, isn't it? Because we're still in summer saving time. So that's the last day that you're going to get vitamin D. And if you store it for 3 months, that'll bring you up to Christmas, and then your D goes down, and then you start picking up your range of infections for the winter. Unless, of course, you're sensible, and November or December you top up. But you've got to go a bit further south than Marrakesh, it would appear. Okay, so this has got us up into our storage there. Now, some people's livers are not very good, particularly if their definitive or prime meridian might be the liver. So they may not store as much as you can. So this is the stored. This is the one they measure because it's stable in the blood. So this is the one they look for. If the levels are within normal parameters, they say, well, your vitamin D is okay. But this is still not the active form. The active form is the 125 and the 2425. To activate this, we need to hydroxylate again in the 1 position. So this then puts another hydroxyl group to it called the 125-hydroxycholecalciferol. And these enzymes that do this are cytochrome enzymes, or in other words, part of the cytochrome P450 pathway. So these are the ones who are sensitive to 450 nanometers. So this one is the 25 hydroxylase, and this is the 1 hydroxylase. But these are all cytochrome P450 enzymes. Now the 125 cholecalciferol is the one mostly involved, that all the books will tell you, with calcium metabolism. So basically what it does is when your blood calcium level goes down, It makes you absorb more calcium if you've got it in food in the gut. It stops you from peeing it out from the kidneys, and it mobilizes it from bone to build your blood calcium level up if it can't get it from the other sources. So it tends to take calcium out of bone, which is not a good idea if you've got a bone problem, is it? Filling somebody up with more and more vitamin D. Okay? On the other hand, the 24-25, which has now put the second hydroxyl group on the 24 and not the first one here, puts the calcium back into the bone. So it almost works the opposite way. They're modulators, if you like. One puts it in, one takes it out. But this is the one that's been shown to have all the properties and all the tissues which have vitamin D receptors, apart from bone. So it's in the prostate, the testes, the brain, the skin, the breast, the colons, the lungs, the heart, and all the immune system. This is the one that keeps your immune system up. So it's been shown to be immunomodulatory, prevention of autoimmune diseases like MS, RA, type 1 diabetes. It prevents infections. It regulates cell growth, in other words, cancer. It improves mental health, regulation of blood pressure, and is anti-inflammatory. Okay, so this is one which is very often low when people have got chronic back pains and things, anything to do with musculoskeletal problems, and this one is often high. So if they're converting here predominantly and not enough here, we're getting calcium deposited, we're getting calcium taken out of bones, and if that gets deposited in the synovial membranes of the joints or in the supraspinatus tendon and so, they get the bursa, the bursitis. You know, they've been out in the sun, first day in April, got the shears out or the lawnmower, taken the top off, you know. Don't know whether we did that this year. And then the next day, ooh, my arm, my shoulder, you know, the acute bursitis, etc. comes on. So let's have cholecalciferol first of all. This is what he makes from the sunshine, gets from his dairy, etc. So at this time of the year, you'd be surprised, wouldn't you, really? This is early July. So now the 125. So that's the 20. Yes, we want the 25. So the 25 now is the storage form. Okay, so this is the storage form. So he's not deficient in making it at the moment, and he's not got a deficiency of the storage. So the 25, the storage one, is fine. All right. So now we do the 125, which is the one that builds his calcium level up in his blood, which has to remain standard. If you get high or low calcium in the blood, then you're in serious trouble with tetany, and you know you can die. This is a hospital case. So what your body does is it regulates your blood calcium, and if it can't get it from any extra food from your gut, and it can't stop it, it stops you from peeing it out through the kidney, it'll take it out your bones. Okay. So we don't strengthen to that one. And now what we do is we go for the 24-25, which is the all singing, dancing version of the one that does supposedly everything else. And he doesn't strengthen to that either. Okay? So we would have said on the first one, the 125, no problem. I never found anybody ever showed to the 125, perhaps one person every couple of years or something. And all this talk about vitamin D being good for everything just didn't seem to make sense. So then we realized that we were testing with the 125, which was the biologically active form, but we thought it was the biologically active form. Now we know it's only one of the biologically active forms. So then I started thinking, well, I'm going to do this properly. If we're going to do it from functional biochemistry, so we introduced the cholecalciferol, the basic vitamin D that we get from the sunshine and from the diet. That's your first test. Then the 25, which is the storage, then the 125, and then the 24-25. These are the important ones, and we're unique because we're the only company in the world that does these as far as markers. Now I want the 125 and the 24-25. So now what I'm effectively doing is making or simulating a 1-24-25. Okay, this is the third active form of vitamin D. Pull. And this is the one that he's low in. Okay, this is the hormone modulator. This is the why I chose somebody who got hormone imbalances, who needs the vitamin D, but they don't need cholecalciferol, the 124 or the 24-25. They need the 1-24-25, which is the combination of the two of them. So if you go back on the screen, Gary. So this one's supposed to do everything that this one doesn't, but this one doesn't do half the things that it's supposed to do. You know, they tell us all about the treatment with inflammatory disorders, anti-inflammatory, etc., regulation of the cell. But I don't find it does as much as what all the gear say. But this one does. So the 124-25 is a mixture of these two when they come together. And it's called calcitarol. Is the hormonally, and this is only from journals at the moment. This is not in any text that I've come across. This is only in journals. So this is much more modern than even all the work on the 24-25. Is the hormonally active form of vitamin D with 3 hydroxyl groups. 1, 2, 3. It's the hormone modulator. This modulates all hormones in the body. This is phenomenal stuff. The pineal, the thyroid, the adrenals, the testes. It modulates all of these. So let's now take one of those, shall we? Okay. So you go on to your prostate. You know where your prostate is? You should have long arms. Okay, so behind the testes in front of the anal area. Okay, so we've got a positive on there. What we're going to do is we'll put the 124-25 on, and we'll begin to pick up a picture. Now go on the tip of your coccyx. That's the point I use for the pineal gland. In other words, it's governor vessel 1. Do you want it? Yeah. Okay. So now we do that one on there. Okay, what was the other one? The adrenals, wasn't it? Yeah. Do you want to go on the adrenals? Fairly sort of high up above the kidneys there, if you can. Not an easy place to get to, is it? So, fine. And then we'll do this one. So, he needs not only the sunshine. The sunshine will do him good, but he's got to get, how is he going to mix these lot together? Because he doesn't need the 124 or the 125 or the 120 or the 24-25. So yeah, shows nicely there. Okay. So there's only one thing that will do this, and that one thing is activator X. Is what? How much does he need? Okay, the 24-25. There's only one substance I've come across which contains this activator. And Weston Price, who was a dentist in the 1920s and 30s, went all over the world for this. His question was, why are people in Ohio, where he worked out of, why are their teeth so bad? And why are people in so-called primitive societies got very good teeth? And so he studied all the reasons, and he came to the conclusion there were certain sacred foods or substances to each of these countries where their teeth and their health were very good. Because if their health was good, their teeth were good. If their teeth were good, their health was good. And they needed vitamin A and vitamin D. So he was talking about D back in the 1920s, 30s. And a good source of A and D at that time was cod liver oil. Because it was a clean product. You know, it's not so clean, unfortunately, now, and doesn't muscle test very well. But he was convinced that there was another compound that put the calcium back into people's teeth. And that D helped, maintain the calcium levels well, and the A was very therapeutic as well. But it wasn't enough to get the calcium back in. And what the interest now is getting calcium back from the blood, where it's accumulating, if you like, and into the bone. And to do this, we want to get it out of particularly things that structures like the arteries. So if you clog up your arteries, you want to get that calcium out or chelate it out and get it back into the bone. And he said the only thing that will do that is what he called high concentrated or high vitamin concentrated butter. And that butter, what they did is they fed the animals, the cows, in Maytime when the grass was very lush. The animal then eats all this grass and it ferments. And if a cow is naturally, they're quite greedy when there's a lot of grass, and they blow up. They blow up with a lot of gas in there, and all this fermentation goes on in their cecums and things because they're ruminants. And then all the contents of that gut gradually get absorbed, you see. And the one thing that you make in there is vitamin K2, because you make K2 from fermentation in the gut, you see, of animals like that. We do to an extent, but the cow does it a lot more efficiently. So they thought, well, what comes out of the cow is, of course, the milk. So you milk the cow when it's got these pastures, nice fresh pastures, organic and so on. And then the milk, you'd have to drink a lot of that milk to get the active ingredients, because milk is 97% water. So that means there's only 3% of solids in there. And we don't want the proteins because we know the D and the K are fat soluble. So what they do is they then take the proteins out and the lactose. So you're left with a thing called butter. Okay? And butter is a really, really nice substance because it's full of all sorts of fat soluble vitamins. Okay? And most modern thoughts, if you go on the websites and things, and even the Western Price Institute, although they're not as convinced as us, say that Activator X, because Western Price himself couldn't identify, they didn't have the facility to know what it was, because there's lots of active ingredients in butter, lots of them. So they called it Activator X. It was other known as the Wasserman factor because it became known as the anti-stiffness factor. So people who were stiff, their flexibility improved when they had this high concentrated butter. Now the importance of the butter was not just that it was very concentrated because it had no proteins and no lactose in it and no water, but the important thing was it was unpasteurized. Well, it wasn't destroyed by the heating process. And the heating process is used in a high temperature, very high temperature, not quite to boiling point, but a high temperature for a short period of time in order, supposedly, to kill tuberculosis. Research afterwards didn't seem to indicate, because if you had a tuberculin-tested herds, which that seemed to be fine, that was the most obvious thing, to have your herd tested for tuberculosis. But the food industry pressed and pressed on this scare of tuberculosis. But the real reason for pasteurizing, took a long time to unfathom, was to increase the shelf life of the dairy product. So milk would then last a week instead of a couple of days before it went off. So that made a difference to the shelf life in the shops, so they could keep milk for quite some time. So unpasteurized tends to go rancid or go off quicker than pasteurized. Could you get my bag out and get some of the dairy? He's getting desperate for his dairy now. Okay. So now, luckily, you can buy unpasteurized butter. And wonderful stuff. Yesterday we demonstrated this here with the beautiful camel wheat bread and the real butter. And for the first time, probably most of you said, well, that's what butter should taste like. So it's grass-fed, organic, and what we'll do is we'll get a spoon and a glass. You can have this glass here. Oh, you got one. And a spoon, and we'll see how much he needs. Now, my observation is that activator D is not K2, and when I've had somebody who shows positive to that, they haven't shown positive to K2. Could you give me the K2? Master Nutrition Box 2. So K2, vitamin K2, is these days extracted more from natto or fermented soya products. So let's see if Ben needs K2. But it just happens that K2 is rich in butter because it comes from the rumination and so on. So that was why they thought, butter, it's K2, which is the activator X. And then there's all this story now about K2, you must have K2 to drive calcium back into the bone and into the teeth. I don't think it's K2. K2 may have a role here, it's right, but the same raw material, the butter, does contain K2, but it contains calciceterol, or activator X. It's the 12425. So you hold that, and we'll give him half a teaspoon, roughly level half a teaspoon. Just stick, yes, okay. I have to put it there. Okay, so he's not half a teaspoon, ma'am. Give him the other half a teaspoon. Now, the most important thing is you don't cook with this, otherwise you obviously destroy it, just in the same. Okay, this is good stuff. This goes straight onto your bread. It's under your camera. So he strengthens to the teaspoon, two half teaspoons. All right?
Breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
That's the good question. Like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if you like. Okay. Now what we want to do is cross-check it to your prostate. You think, this is interesting, because pasteurizing came in just before the Second World War. And this was the time, after the Second World War, really, we started to get a lot of problems. Look at the incidence of hormonal problems, okay? PMT menopausal problems, and if you watch those programs in Victorian life on television a few months ago, menstrual problems, menopause was never mentioned. It didn't exist. Okay? Yes, the menstrual cycle stopped, but nobody's worried about that because it didn't produce symptoms. There was no menopausal symptoms, premenstrual tension. None of those things existed. So what was different? Their food quality. They ate more fruit and veg. They were of different types of fruit and veg, but their dairy wasn't pasteurized. You think of all the hormonal problems that have arisen, all the prostates for the boys. Okay, go on GV1 at the back and the tail end. All the prostate, all the breast cancers and the hormonal-related cancers are involved since the wartime. And gradually then you change over a period of time. You move on 30, 40 years. And we're the baby boomers. We're the post-war generation. And we're just getting to that point where we're getting to, when the hormones might be of importance to us. I.e. they're beginning to go down and we want to know what is it? And more people are getting prostate cancer. It's very worrying for the men, isn't it? And more women are getting breast cancer and other hormonal-related cancers. So what I'm saying is one of the issues may well be we're not getting the 124-25 anymore, which was naturally present in dairy products. And the only way, I've started introducing this to various of my patients who've got really stubborn hormonal problems. Pineal for sleep, thyroid for metabolic rate, adrenals for stress, testes for bodybuilding, the hormonal side. So you'll find it very tolerant and very tasty.
Time of day? Or?
Time of day. Now, I thought you were going to ask that. Now, this is the difficulty. If we go breakfast, this is when you would normally think about having it. So what I suggest is you don't put it onto bread, but don't put it onto toast unless the toast is cool. So if you put it on hot toast, it might be just at that temperature where it might have an effect on the fatty acids there and the vitamin D. Okay, so then we'll do lunchtime, and then we'll do circulation sex time in the evening. And that's the bad news, right? It's not at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So we now do triple wala, which is just before going to bed. And that's when it tends to show up. Now, this is difficult, thinking I've got to get butter down me last thing at night. Okay? So I think in these circumstances, you might be able to just put it onto a bit of bread, something. If you want, you can put it in and just swallow it down. But it's interesting that the body says that's the time when it can use it best. And it's just before you're going to bed and going to sleep. So it may be that it's profound that you need those nutrients to balance your hormones at the end of the day, particularly your stress hormones for your case, because it was adrenal. Was it adrenal medulla? Adrenal cortex, yeah, so that's your cortisol and things. Your pineal hormones when you go to bed, and your prostate gland. So do you want to try it on a spoon now? If you sit yourself up there. Have you got the spoon there, Joe? So what we'll do is we'll really spoil you. But it is nicer, on a fresh piece of bread. Oh, he's going to put the whole lot in. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. That's it. That's fine. Yeah, you're done. Okay. So that's the story to date, very quickly, of vitamin D. So vitamin D has 3 biologically active forms. One we know virtually nothing about, but we're just beginning to discover. And it's quite interesting when you discover it. It's like the 100th monkey, isn't it? You find that now other people have done this, and everybody starts moving in the same direction. So we know about the old 125 and the 24-25, and now we've got the 124-25. One thing I should have done with him that I didn't do is to find out which of these 2 pathways is the one that's not working. And I apologize for that, because my experience is I found this pathway seems to work with everybody. This pathway doesn't seem to work with this particular case. So it's a polymorphism. In other words, it's a genetic polymorphism of the 24-hydroxylase enzyme here to convert the 125 into the 124-25. This means that they get a relative build-up of the 125, which means they tend to take calcium out of the bones and deposit it in the tissues. So that's the one I find. And I think this is the polymorphism. In other words, it's a genetic single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP here. So you may never know that you had this until you exhibit a deficiency of this, and you wouldn't know you got that until you start showing hormonal imbalances, which just don't seem to respond to anything else. And then remember here that this 124-25 is the hormonally active form of vitamin D. And when I saw that in the periodical in PubMed, I thought, wow, that answers it. That's the perfect word that I found. It's the hormonally active form of the D, and it's a hormone modulator. Okay, so here we've got a picture of mushrooms, dairy, etc., called ergocalciferol, or D2. And here we've got the sunshine going to D3, and from fish here as well, and eggs. You'd be lucky to find, that would be fish liver oil really, right, or oily fish. And eggs, you'd be lucky to find much D in eggs. You might find a little bit. So calcidiol is the primary form of vitamin D in the blood. This is basically the 25, the storage form. Then we see the active form here of the 24, degraded in 24, 25, which was long thought to be an inert metabolite. And then we've got the calcitriol, which is the primary active form of vitamin D, so they say. And this is degraded then into the 124-25, which again in many books is considered to be inactive. It's a metabolite, but it's probably going to prove to be the most active of all of them. And that's a similar picture showing the 124-25. I've slipped in the activator X in there in brackets, and then it's excreted. So enzymes that are induced by vitamin D, tyrosine hydroxylase, tryptophan hydroxylase, cholesterol to pregnenolone, pregnenolone to progesterone, nitric oxide synthase, and it increases glutathione levels. So this is important because it aids us in our detoxification. This is not surprising. Tyrosine hydroxylase is going to help us go on to make tyrosine derivatives like dopamine. So this is the feel-good factor. Tryptophan hydroxylase helps us to build tryptophan into serotonin. Cholesterol to pregnenolone, pregnenolone to progesterone starts our hormonal corticosteroid hormones. Nitric oxide synthase gives us the vasodilation, and glutathione gives us the detoxification. It's not surprising you feel better when the sun shines, isn't it? You know, when you think about it, everybody feels better, don't they, when it's sunny. So there's the tyrosine to dopamine pathway. There's the cholesterol to pregnenolone and progesterone. So we'll just do vitamin A. Vitamin A is quite short, but it's a very similar story. And what we find here with the vitamin A is that the source from our diet can be two sources. It can be foods like fish, etc., and it can be in the form of carotenoids. Now, carotenoids have to convert into the active forms of vitamin A, and they may not always do this. So sometimes people can be vitamin A deficient and only respond to vitamin A no matter how many carotenoids they get in from their diet. So the diet contains retinol palmitate. This is again rather like the raw material like cholecalciferol that we get with vitamin D, but this would be your raw vitamin A within your food. You can see it's a palmitate, which is a carbon-16 fatty acid derivative, so it's fat soluble. This is then taken through the small intestine, and to do this we need to break yours down, so we need bile and we need zinc. And this is then converted into retinol. So this is more, if you like, the storage form, like the vitamin D with the 25 hydroxy. The retinol is more the storage form of vitamin A. This then converts by retinol dehydrogenase, which means it removes a hydrogen, or dehydrogenase, and that's why we have NAD. So NAD will convert to NADH because it will be the reduced form. So it takes the H from here, so it becomes reduced. And this is a zinc-dependent enzyme. This then makes all-trans retinol, which is the first biologically active form of vitamin A, and is mainly present, of course, in the back of the eye. So this is where vitamin A works as far as the eye is concerned. And all-trans retinol in the eye goes to the 11-cis retinol to go on to make rhodopsin, the visual pigment in the eye. And to do this, we need ATP, but we need magnesium to do this. When we looked at ATP, we know that if we're not producing enough ATP and we're tired, I expect most of us know that when we're tired, we don't see so well. Our vision deteriorates. And when we've got plenty of energy, we can see things much better. And this is why, because we can't make the rhodopsin or the visual pigment here. This all-trans retinol can also be made from the carotenoids. So you see, carotenoids don't make retinol, they make retinal by a dioxygenase enzyme, which is iron dependent. So everybody should be able to get some vitamin A from the carotenoids, but it's dubious as to how effective this is, how efficient it is in adults. Then the retinol will convert irreversibly, in other words, only one way, by retinaldehyde dehydrogenase, which again needs NAD and takes another hydrogen off all-trans retinol to make all-trans retinoic acid. And this is the substance which is rich in the skin. This is the wonder substance that they all look for with Roaccutane and things for acne. So it has wonderful effect on acne and many other skin disorders, worthwhile considering in rosacea and psoriasis and all sorts of things. Always test with the all-trans retinoic acid. So like the vitamin D, we have the different components to test with. Rather than just testing a person with vitamin A and saying, oh, you strengthen or you don't, it doesn't mean anything. It means, can they get the vitamin A to work? Do they strengthen to retinol, all-trans retinol, or retinoic acid? Because a lot of people will only strengthen to this and not to this, because it doesn't matter how much vitamin A they get in if they can't convert it. So the all-trans retinoic acid is in bones and teeth, the immune system, gene transcription, the skin, cellular health of the embryo, reproduction, and hematopoiesis, in other words, the production of red blood cells. So all-trans retinoic has a lot of uses in the body, but we can't test it directly from just testing it with retinol palmitate or vitamin A. You need to have the other markers which we put into the kits now. So retinoic acid, retinol, retinal, and retinoic acid. So the beauty of these things is if a person has enough NAD or vitamin B3 and zinc, they can do the conversions. But if there is a polymorphism, then it's hard for the body to do this if there's a genetic block. But we do find that you can express these enzymes better by upregulating them. And the thing that seems to upregulate them, first of all, they started using piperine from pepper, and then other compounds like in the vitamin D. But we find black cumin seed is one of the most effective ways, as the oil. Now, if you've never tasted black cumin seed oil, it's gorgeous because it gives you a real kick. It's like pepper. You know, it has that strong peppery taste. So when people have their spoonful of vitamin D or vitamin A, they know that it's going to be active. It activates it inside the body.